Welcome back to Q Dads, it's me, Ste, and yes, episode 9 of Severance has just dropped, giving us a roller coaster of different emotions, with a few sad goodbyes, but then also some very intriguing plot points. And our favourite moment of the episode, which we are now calling Clip of the Week, has to be good old Mr. Milchick.
Devour feculence. It means eat shit, Mr. Drummond.
As normal, we're going to be breaking down some of the great scenes for you guys and what that means for the season final and potentially a season 3. So don't forget to hit that subscribe button, as it really does help the channel to grow as we etch ever closer to 3,000 subs. So we start the episode off with Helena swimming and eating a hard-boiled egg whilst her dad Jame Egan watches. And the weird thing here is he actually informs her that he would rather have her eating the eggs raw.
Give me the meat and give it to me raw.
Which then obviously starts to make us question that something weird is going on in their relationship, especially when that connects to the final scene where Jame Egan approaches Helena on the 7th floor. What is his purpose there? Could it be, as we've mentioned before, that the Egans see themselves as almost godly, and technically the innies would be their creation? So could Jame actually be proud of Helly for deceiving him previously, almost like he prefers innies to outies? I don't know, but Jame comes across a bit crazy, so it wouldn't surprise me if this was the case. Moving on, Miss Huang passes the Wintertide Fellowship and is offered to go all the way to Svalbard to help with the global reform programme. But I actually have to ask the question myself here, as she breaks the ring toss game in a ceremonial fashion. What did she actually do to get on the Wintertide programme in the first place? Miss Cobel was the creator of the chip and the whole severed floor. You could say, so is it that she's on the Wintertide for the same type of award that Miss Cobel got, meaning she had to do something pretty great? And the way she makes that last comment about failing to facilitate Dylan makes me ask,
I'm sorry, Dylan G. I should have facilitated better.
Was the Family Wellness Centre where Gretchen and Dylan hooked up actually an idea and a construct from Miss Huang? Is that another idea that Jame Egan took from another person on the fellowship and claiming it for himself? And if that is the case, what did Mr. Milchick create? Could Milchick have actually been involved in the language that is used at Lumen? Ben speculated that this could be the reason why he speaks the way he does, as he was pushed to speak like this in order to help the language develop at Lumen. Could Milchick have been the writer of some of the books in Lumen? Hence why he was so annoyed when Helena laughed at the stories. Not because it was about Kia, but because he had drafted these stories himself in order to help the innies. Let us know your thoughts on that. Moving on, Gretchen tells Dylan about the fact that she kissed his innie, and this of course leads him to losing his absolute shit and threatening to quit the Severance programme if she continues the relationship. We then get a quick shot of Irving's dog staring blankly at Burt, who sits on the bed, and of course Burt is reading through some of those personal notes that Irving wrote about the people of Lumen, calling Burt a Lumen goon, which Burt did not like one bit. And in this moment he asks Irving if he wants to go for a ride, but again, the look on Burt's face when he asks, and he mentions the fact that he no longer works for Lumen, makes us think the opposite. I genuinely still believe that Burt is working for Lumen. The part of the episode with Burt and Irv was really strange. It's clear Burt is having an issue with what the outie and innie have done, driving Irv to the station, and Burt mentioning he's driven people before, and the fact they brought the dog makes me think Irv isn't coming back from whatever is at the end of the line. Now, is it going to be some weird journey like the Orc Bowl? Just the way Burt speaks about it makes it all sound very mysterious, saying things like, I can't know where you'll get off. I'm going to assume this is where Burt has always driven people. So yeah, I'm not quite sure what's going on here, but hopefully we do find out next week, as the big question around Irving still is, why does his outie know what the export door looks like? We then get Mark going for a ride with his sister to meet Miss Cobel, and we get Helena being quite rude to Milchick as she storms into his office demanding to see where Mark is. Then Dylan and Gretchen meet in the Family Wellness Centre, and out of nowhere Dylan pulls that surprise move and actually proposes to Gretchen.
Gretchen G,
Oh my god.
I love you.
But of course, Gretchen declines and leaves him as a broken man. But then when he chats with Helena and she tries to give him some advice to go and find the export room, he does give her a quick reality check and reminds her of actually all this is her fault and it's the reason they are in the situation they are now. Which I kind of think was a little bit too harsh, but at the same time, it was kind of justified as well. I mean, the way she spoke to Milchick was pretty mean, if I'm honest. And then Mark ends up meeting up with Miss Cobel, who informs us that if he has already completed Project Cold Harbour, then Gemma will of course be dead, which still makes us question, why is that final room called Cold Harbour? What will happen in that room that will essentially end Gemma's life? Now, is the end of Gemma's life figuratively or metaphorically? Are they saying the life she knew will be fully over? Do they plan to keep her there, severed forever, perhaps? Or will she finally get into that car crash that was supposed to have happened, making her die like she was supposed to? That does sound so Lumen to me. Now, before we move on to that final scene about Mark and Miss Cobel, which we'll talk about in just a moment, we get to then see Dylan resigning as an innie. But of course, what follows after that, again, is probably the best scene of the episode. This is where Mr. Drummond is essentially reprimanding Milchick for not doing his job properly and making him shorten the word apologise over and over. But then something snaps within Milchick as he tells Mr. Drummond to devour feculence, or basically eat shit, which I thought was one of the greatest mic drops ever. And then to go on to say that actually what goes on outside of the severed floor is not his problem. And I think it was just a great little moment for his character. Now, for me, this shows just the huge amount of growth and resent in Mr. Milkshake's character. My hat goes off to the actor playing him. Honestly, I think he's one of the best characters in the episode. And as I've mentioned many times, I think he will soon switch sides and start to go after Lumen, especially with Cobel and Mark on side. Following on later, we actually see a tear in his eye as he calls Mark, and Mark just basically says he doesn't want to come in because of personal stuff, and it's just a bit of balance in life. This then triggers something in Milchick, who I'm not sure if at the moment realises that he isn't possibly going to see Mark tomorrow, because that's probably going to be the last day after speaking to Drummond the way he did. And following that, Milchick is well aware of the work-life balance, because for him, it doesn't exist, which means that was the tear because of sadness of not having any form of work-life balance, or the fear of missing out, or could that tear be just because the joy that actually, because of what he said to Mr. Drummond, he will now get sacked and eventually have a life to himself where he can do his own personal things. But of course, we then must move on to the final scene, where Cobel takes Mark to the cabins where all the pregnant women go to give birth. And interestingly here, the way of getting past the security guard is by saying that Devon is having one of Jame's babies, which raises eyebrows, because actually, how many children is he sending to these cabins? For the fact it becomes the norm. And we even get mention of a name of Martha White from the 9th floor. So, what is he doing? Is he secretly impregnating people, or is he doing what Elon Musk does and is just having an abundance of different children with different women? And because of his age, are they technically now growing up and potentially his children are giving birth themselves? I'm not entirely sure, but it was just weird how that was the way they got past security. And more importantly, surely this goes against one of the tempers. Does feel so strange. I do hope we get to see more of Jame. I think we need a proper deep dive into the Egans, but hopefully if they do that, it's not 37 minutes of drivel. But then of course the door closes on the cabin and we meet Mark Sinney, who is as confused as hell, but is led upstairs to meet with Miss Cobel. Now, what I think is going to happen here is they're going to inform Mark of the information he needs to rescue Gemma, and then send him back to work. Obviously, hence the episode next week being called Cold Harbour. Now, obviously, they're going to hope that he can get in there as normally he would, and his plan is probably going to be to get to the export room and go down there to finally confront Gemma, which we're speculating because of the lift and how it works with Gemma, that actually it won't be Mark's innie, but Mark's outie that would then appear on that floor. Or, as a wild one here, when he exits the lift and sees Gemma, will he say, "Who are you?" Meaning we now have a third Mark, Just like when Gemma enters other rooms, she becomes a new person. Will this now happen to Mark? But obviously, back to what we actually know. Have Lumen cottoned on to this situation? Normally, they would obviously prevent him returning to work here, especially if they figured out he's partly reintegrated. But obviously, in this instance, they can't, because they need the completion of Cold Harbour for whatever reason that is. The real question I have here is Miss Cobel actually on Mark's side, or will she double cross them for Lumen? As remember, Cold Harbour was the thing she created. She wanted it. She wanted it complete. She invented it. Now, just before we end here, just going back to Mark potentially getting into that export room. If we cast our mind back to the final episodes of season 1 for a second, where we have the last line of the episode being Mark saying, "She's alive," could we actually get something really similar for the end of season 2, where potentially Mark's going to open the lift to the export room and for Gemma to not recognise him, as she's now fully severed to be Miss Casey? Or even better here, could she simply not be there and has already been taken away to be disposed of, for lack of a better word, with Mark then saying the last line of the episode, "Is she alive?" As I think this would be a really nice play on the first season, almost ending 2 seasons with the same words. Let me know what you think on that, because I think that'd be a great way to end it and keep us all on our seats. But who knows? Overall, I thought this episode was actually pretty decent, to be fair, and I think it makes up for last week's episode. But as always, it's not about us. This is about you guys. So hit us up in the comments with some answers to the questions we're about to ask you, and your thoughts on how this episode was, or even your theories. Let us know in the comments. So here are my questions to you guys. Firstly, what do you think is in the Cold Harbour room? Do you think Milchick will betray Lumen? And finally, and what I think is going through most of our heads here, is what do you think Jame wants with Helena? Thank you all for watching. Please subscribe. As we've said, we're so close to 3,000 subs now. And get ready for next week's final, as apparently it's 76 minutes long. So hopefully it's going to be a good one. Anyways, as always guys, catch you next time with something new.